Hi, welcome back to Growing Up Catholic - His Loving Touch. My name's Elaine, and today I'm going to tell you the true stories of my mom, Beatrice, and her Aunt Nellie. But before that, I just need to give you a little history of my mom's family. My mom's dad's name was Joseph, and he was a metal worker, and he always worked on the high-rise buildings. And he fell 4 floors and broke his back and became very ill. My mom's mom, Eugenie Frenette, she had 9 children. The first was a baby girl, full term, 10 pounds, and was stillborn. And then she gave birth to 5 boys and 3 girls. My mom was the first of the 3 girls. So when my mom was around 11, 12 years old, I call her Meme, my grandmother, had another child, stillborn. And she went into a deep, deep depression. And the doctors tried to treat her at home, but eventually they sent her to a psychiatric hospital in London, Ontario, Canada. It was called St. Thomas. So that's kind of a brief history of what her family was going through. Now, the Great Depression started. And the Great Depression was when the stock markets fell and the rich became poor and the poor much poorer. Now I have dates because I want to make sure I get it right. So the Great Depression started October 29th, 1929 and ended on September 3rd, 1939. So during that time, my grandmother was in the hospital, and because it was the Depression, hospitals were given so much money allotted for each patient. So my grandmother was in the hospital for 5 years. But when she was taken away to the hospital, or sent to the hospital, her dad decided that the 3 girls needed to go live with relatives because he couldn't take care of them. So all the boys stayed home, even though the 2 youngest should have went with relatives too. I hope that mouse didn't show. I always play with it. Anyway, so my mom's Aunt Nellie, who lived on a farm with her family, I don't know where that was, but anyway, she came on the train to pick up my mother and brought her back home with her. Now Mom kind of really flourished on the farm, and her greatest job, or her happiest job, she said, was to ring the triangle to announce meal times. And she said often her oldest cousin, he was in his late 20s, would run from the fields or wherever he was and scoop her up at the triangle, because my mom said she just rang that triangle a long time. So he would just come running at her, scoop her up, and took her to the breakfast table and sat her down. She said they all kept saying, "Beatrice, don't ring that bell so long, they hear it." But Mom loved it, so they couldn't talk her out of that, except her oldest cousin did. So she really enjoyed her time, but she too became a little, well, very sad, right? Because she had to leave her family, having her dad sick and her mother in the hospital. So Mom said she would often read a book in a tree, sitting on a tree limb, in the tree. And Aunt Nellie became concerned because my mother was, growing more despondent. So Aunt Nellie took her to the doctors. So the doctor asked Mom, about her parents and what was going in her life. And he said, "Do you do anything other than your chores?" Which weren't heavy at all. But she told the doctor, she said, I read a book. I read books sitting in the tree. And he said, "Well, what kind of books do you read?" And she said, "I read science fiction about aliens." And then the doctor told her, he said, "That's probably not a good idea, Beatrice. I want you to, read something that's uplifting and makes you feel good." And then he said to her, "Do you have any hobbies? Do you like to do anything else?" And she said she loved to draw. And she especially loved to draw horses. So the doctor said to her, "Well, when you're sitting in your tree, why don't you draw?" And she said, "Well, I don't have anything to draw with." And Aunt Nellie said, "You don't worry, Beatrice. We will get you stuff to draw with." And she did. And so Mom drew everything, from the horses and the cows and her relatives, the farmhouse, everything. Later on, as I grew older, my mom's artistic abilities were very beautiful. She did paintings. She was a true artist. Back to Aunt Nellie. Now another history lesson. World War II started in September 1st, 1939 and ended September 2nd, 1945. 6 years and 1 day from the beginning. I don't even remember what I was going to say. Wait a minute. Hi, back. Yeah, I was talking about World War II and Aunt Nellie's sons who went to war. Her oldest son had been to war and was back again. He got injured right at the beginning. I'm not sure. So I'm not even going to discuss him. I'm sorry if you keep seeing the mouse arrow. Okay, so I'm not going to talk about her oldest cousin because Mom really never said he was in the war. She only talked about Aunt Nellie's youngest son because it happened when she was there. And it was a very emotional time. So Aunt Nellie's youngest child, a son, he went overseas to fight in the war. And every day I am going to cough. And every day he was gone, my Aunt Nellie prayed for him, of course, for him to come back home safely. A lot of us know about the stories of World War II. Pretty much the same thing happened in other wars, where when a family member was killed or missing, the government would come into their driveways, people's driveways, with their black cars and tell the family of either the death or the missing. So Aunt Nellie was praying against that. She did not want to see a black car come into her driveway. Now at this time, Aunt Nellie's husband had died, and she she had her other family around her. So my mom said sometimes she would come down the stairs from her bedroom and find Aunt Nellie kneeling in the front room with her hands outstretched in prayer, praying for her son that he would return safely. And she also prayed for all mothers and families of soldiers and Marine, everybody in the military. So Mom just said Aunt Nellie, just prayed all the time. And whenever my mother would have a little problem or something, Aunt Nellie would say to her, "Come on, Beatrice, let's pray about this." And she would teach Mom about the Lord and, just how he worked in everyday living, how he answered prayers, how he didn't answer prayers, how we just had to learn to trust God. And she always said, "We don't have the mind of God, Beatrice, so we can't understand his decisions in our lives. We just have to trust that he loves us so much that he does the best thing for us, even when it doesn't look like the best thing." And she said that a lot of times when we go through hard times, it helps us to grow, and God teaches us through that. So moving on, Aunt Nellie's prayer was answered. Her son did return home. And my mom said the joy, the happiness, the celebration the day he returned home. They were so excited. And she said when mealtime came around, all the neighbors had come, brought food, and she didn't have to ring a triangle because, on the farm they only dealt with what they had to, and then celebrate with having their family member home. So she had not known her youngest cousin until he got home. And I think he was around 22, 23 years old. But Aunt Nellie noticed he was becoming more despondent. Well, actually, the whole family members, everyone noticed it. Today we would call that post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. And back then it was, maybe called melancholy, I don't know, depression. But anyways, with each passing day, her son started to withdraw from family activities and just stay in his room. And 3 weeks after he came home, after Mom rang the triangle for breakfast, and her oldest cousin sat her at the table, they were all waiting for Aunt Nellie's youngest son to come down to eat. And they waited. And then she said to her oldest son, go get your brother for breakfast. Now, Mom said Aunt Nellie's look on her face was, well, it worried Mom, because it was as if Aunt Nellie was holding her breath. And then suddenly she heard the cries of her oldest son. "Mom! Mom, get up here quick!" Everybody jumped up. And Mom was looking at Aunt Nellie, and she slowly got up. And as she went up the stairs quietly, she held my mom's hand. And when she got to her son's room, she saw that he had died. Mom held back, just outside of the room. And everybody was just so distraught and upset. Somebody called the doctor, and the doctor came over and announced that he did die. And the doctor eventually told them that he died from heart failure, that his heart couldn't take what he went through, because he was on the Rock of Gibraltar as it was being bombed for a whole month, so that constant shaking and rattling and fear just took its toll on his heart, his body. So the day of the funeral, my mom wouldn't leave Aunt Nellie's side. And one of the neighbors came up to her, and she said to Aunt Nellie, "You must be so angry with God." And my Aunt Nellie, Mom said, Aunt Nellie looked at her and said, "Why would I be angry with God?" And the neighbor said, "Well, Nellie, you've been praying so long to have your son come home. He comes home and then he dies 3 weeks later. How can you not be angry with God?" And Aunt Nellie just looked at this woman and said, "I'm not angry with God. God answered my prayer. My son did come home. I held him. I hugged him. I ate with him at the table." She said, many mothers don't have that. They don't even know where their son's burial is. So anyways, Aunt Nellie said, "I know where my son is, and we're going to bury him beside his father. And I have peace with knowing God took him home and took him out of his suffering." Now that's the faith Aunt Nellie had. She never wavered from trusting God, having faith in Him, even in the face of death of her young son. Which is kind of unbelievable at times. It's hard to not get angry with God. I've been angry with God with certain situations, especially illnesses of 2 of my children, well, 3 of my children. And that will come later. But after the funeral, everybody just went right back to what they were doing on the farm. And of course, life had changed for them. And my meme, after the 5 years at the hospital, was finally released at the end of the depression and went back home. And Aunt Nellie brought Mom home on the train and stayed maybe a week, I think my mom, a week, just to help out with the boys and my grandfather. And at that time, my grandfather, Mom's dad, was diagnosed with bowel cancer. And the doctors felt that that was brought on from the injury he had sustained. So everything went, I can't say went back to normal, not when you have a father dying. But life went on, and her dad was not in a hospital, he was home. She was 19 now, she grew. I think she left Aunt Nellie's at age 17. Because her dad was sick for two years, or 2 years when she got home. And when she was 19, she went to check on her dad, and he was in a lot of pain, and he was on morphine. And at that moment, he looked at my mother and he said, "Beatrice, you look like you're in pain." And she was. She had horrible menstrual pain, and her dad just looked at her and he said, come and lay beside me, and I'll give you one of my pain pills. And he did. And she said she just laid there with her dad, listening to his heartbeat, knowing it was going to beat much longer. So she relished that moment with her dad, and the pain did leave, and she fell asleep. He fell asleep. He didn't live much longer after that. And Aunt Nellie came back down for the funeral and to help support the family again. So that's the story of my great Aunt Nellie, the chubby, small, blue-eyed lady who lived for God, whose faith grew as she got older. Aunt Nellie lived till she was 99. She was still traveling on the trains, going places, visiting relatives, up till she was 97. But by then she was, joined by a family member, which she didn't like because she was very independent. One story I forgot to tell you was about Aunt Nellie's daughter. Aunt Nellie's daughter had a wound on her leg that wouldn't heal. And she had gone to many, many doctors, and no one could heal it. So Aunt Nellie said, enough's enough. And she said, "Oh, Mom," this is her daughter talking, I know what you want to do. And she said, and I'm going to do it. So she laid hands on her daughter's leg near the wound and prayed, asking God to heal this wound that the doctors couldn't. Because she said, Jesus, you are the great physician. Please heal my daughter's wound. And the next day, when the daughter woke up, the wound was gone. So God answers prayers. And often it's not always the way we want it. But with her daughter, it was amazing. So I'm going to end with that. My great Aunt Nellie was a woman who lived her faith and by example showed that faith to everyone in her life. And that's it. I am going to stop the recording and say God bless you. Thank you for watching. My videos are not perfect by far. I lose thought sometimes of my, what was I saying next, or, you know, but it's human. And I'm talking about human life and family life. And that's not perfect. Nothing's perfect except. So God bless you. Thank you for watching. And I'll probably post another video by the beginning of next week. This is Thursday, March something, March 6th. I don't know. Anyways, it's March 6th, I think. And I haven't looked at the date yet. You lose time when you're no longer working and you don't have kids going to school or anything else. I know it's Thursday. I just don't know if it's March 5th or 6th. Okay. I know what my kids call it. Should I say it? Like a brain fart? Anyway, okay. God bless. See you again soon. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.